What is happening, people? Welcome back to the Lions Den Academy. I'm so excited to dive into chapter 2 of Matthew here for you. I will be splitting this video, or this chapter, I should say, up into two different videos. And then I did want to take a brief minute to let you know that I have started adding lecture notes, and I've put the shareable link for that in the description below. So if follow along, kind of fill in the blank and stuff like that, helps you keep engaged with it or anything like that, feel free to take use of that resource. But with that being said, let's jump right in. All right, so let's jump into chapter 2 here. So verse 1 and 2 is basically us telling us about the wise men arriving in Jerusalem. So it begins, "Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, 'Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him.'" Now, Matthew actually tells us just a little bit about the birth of Jesus here. We're going to really get into that in the book of Luke, like I kind of mentioned. Instead, Matthew here is focusing on what happens after Jesus was born. So before we dive into this further, I do want to talk for a minute just about the wise men themselves and King Herod to give you a bit of background and context. So, King Herod, definitely a bad guy, but before we start listing off all the bad stuff about him, I do want to just mention some of the good things that he did do. So for starters, I mean, he was really good at, politics and at administration, did great things with, as far as building goes. He really wanted to try to be, loved and admired by the Jewish people that he was leading. He wasn't Jewish himself. And so he even, started the project to rebuild the second temple. And he did good things to help end a famine. However, he was also extremely power hungry. He was jealous. He was a bit delusional and very, very cruel. And it's actually believed that he was suffering from some sort of kidney disease and gangrene as well. And that in his later years, that just basically exponentially made his bad traits get worse and worse and worse. I mean, he's known to even go off and kill people of his own family that he thought might be trying to take power away from him. In fact, the Roman Emperor Augustus said that it's better to be King Herod's pig than it is his son. And then as far as the wise men go, I know when you normally see like a nativity scene at Christmas, you see three wise men. They're at the manger worshiping Jesus. But that's not exactly the time frame of how that happened. Additionally, it's most likely more than just the three men that are typically seen in the nativity scene there. For starters, let's just talk about who they are. So some people will call them kings. There's even that Christmas song, "We Three Kings," but they're not really kings, right? So I mean, and that most likely was construed from Psalm 69, 72, and Isaiah 49 and 60, where it says that kings will come and worship the Messiah, right? But like I said, they're not kings, but instead they were known as magi. And those were men who studied astronomy, studied philosophy, studied dreams and interpreting them, and then books on prophecy as well. Now, being that they were from the east, that means that they would have also been among the Jewish people that were centuries ago exiled from Judah and Israel, and just with the Magi's interest in prophecies and stuff like that, they definitely were kind of primed and anticipating these signs of the coming Messiah, just like the Jewish people that they were with. So with that context in mind, let's jump back into that scripture real quick. So the wise men initially came to Jerusalem, being led there either by the star or assuming that the leaders of the Jewish people would be seeing the star and being, excited and trying to find, the Messiah themselves. However, these wise men will soon discover that that's not the case. When they arrive, they ask, "Where's he who has been born King of the Jews?" Now, this itself is fairly interesting, considering that during the time of Jesus' birth, the Jewish people were actually pretty despised and looked down upon. And that's kind of because of their unique customs and beliefs, and additionally, they tended to be very prosperous and wealthy. And it's just kind of remarkable that these people, the wise men from the east, would make such effort to come worship someone that is a king of a race that at that time was just not really looked up to, and this is despite the fact that while they were God's chosen people, just at that time they were just looked down upon by most, unfortunately. So now, verse number 3. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all of Jerusalem with him. So let's break that down into two sections. So when Herod the king heard this, he was troubled. So Herod was constantly on guard against threats to his rule, especially from his own family, like I kind of mentioned. He actually had assassinated many of his own family members who he suspected of disloyalty, to include his wife, her mother, and 3 of his own sons, which kind of alludes to Augustus mentioning that it's better to be his pig than his son. And then we come to the next part of that phrase where it says, "and all Jerusalem with him." The fact that Jerusalem was troubled by this as well is likely due to the fact that they were anticipating what Herod's response to this would be, and were already kind of on guard of, oh God, well, what is he going to do? And he definitely does lash out and take some pretty crazy steps here, as we'll see here in the coming story. But the fact that this much trouble is already being spurned is just showing the greatness of Jesus, honestly. Even as a young child, no sooner than is he being born, than he's causing great waves and changing the world. So now let's dive into verses 4 through 6. Here basically is where King Herod is instructed regarding the Messiah's coming by the chief priests and scribes. So, and I quote, "And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They told him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for so it is written by the prophet, and you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judea, for from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." So let's take a look at that real quick. So when it's talking about all the chief priests and the scribes here, this is actually the first contact that the religious leaders had with Jesus. As we're going to come to see here in Jesus's interactions with the Pharisees, they have all the biblical information in front of them. They actually, typically, most of them had it completely memorized, yet having all the information and applying it is completely different, right? So they had and understood all the information correctly, but they failed to either apply it or believe it in their own life. Sadly, they had everything they needed, but they just seemed completely uninterested in wanting to go and meet Jesus. And additionally, they said to him, just to give you greater context here, in Bethlehem of Judea, and this is actually quoting Micah 5:2 when it's talking about, and the prophet said, and basically they understood that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem of Judea, and they specify of Judea because there's another town further north called Bethlehem as well, and they just wanted to make sure that there was no error in what they were trying to say. So now as we come to verse 7 and 8, here where we see, true to character, King Herod attempts to use the wise men to track down Jesus so that he can kill them. And I quote, "Then Herod, when he had secretly called the wise men, determined from them what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, 'Go search carefully for the young child, and when you found him, bring back word to me that I may come and worship him also.'" So he from this, he's determining to them what time the star appeared. So Herod, as we'll come to see, he later executed a mass murder of all boys 2 and younger that were born in that area. And we can assume that the wise men first saw this star about a year or so previously, on the night that Jesus was born. Their journey from the east to Judea wasn't just like a day trip. They didn't just pick up and pack a bag for the night. And they most likely had to make some sort of preparation and stuff like that before leaving as well. So then he says, bring back word to me that I may come and worship him also. Now, obviously, the only sort of worship that Herod was talking about here is killing. That must be what he worships, right? But he also knew that these wise men who made all this trip and all this effort to come and worship Jesus, if he says, hey, bring back this kid to me so I can kill him, they're not going to obviously want to help him in any sort of way. So Herod's trying to be crafty, but they pretty much see right through him. They don't even agree that they're going to come back. Herod just asks that they do. So here we come to the final verses of what we'll cover in this video, which is verses 9 through 12. And essentially, to sum that up, it's basically where the wise men are presenting gifts to Jesus and leaving, obviously, without informing Herod. So these verses go, when they heard the king, they departed. And behold, the star which they had seen in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. And when they had come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary, his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented gifts to him, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Then, being divinely warned in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed for their own country another way. So let's break that down. So, behold, the star which they had seen in the east went before them. So the star continued to guide them, and apparently it reappeared. Now, there's a lot of debates on this, on whether this was like similar to how God ushered his people out before with a flaming pillar at night, and then a cloud during the day. And then some people think it's just some huge bright stars. I think it might be a meteor. We don't really know, right? But it was something that was obviously a phenomenon, and that was obviously able to be easily determined that, hey, this isn't just something normally that's going on in the sky. After all, they were astronomers, and they went to go follow it. Now, when they finally found, and it came and they found Jesus, they saw the young child with Mary, his mother. And he's likely between 6 to 18 months at this point. They do say young child, they don't say infant, they say young child. And if you also notice, they say, which is against custom, they say the young child with his mother. Normally, any parent would be listed before the child. So now they found Jesus, and what they do is they present their treasures to them. And that's, like I said, the gold, the frankincense, and the myrrh. Now, it's common, especially in the East, to any time that you're going to visit someone that's royalty, or someone that's of significant importance, that you bring a gift. I could say even modern times, working in the Middle East, I did personal security details for the ambassador and all that kind of stuff in Iraq. And there countless times, when they do the visits, they would exchange pretty fancy gifts to one another, just as a sign of your respect and admiration. Now, they presented the gifts to Jesus, right? He's an infant. He obviously can't use this stuff himself, but they are presenting it to Jesus. But obviously, it's going to be Mary and Joseph that are going to use those gifts for Jesus' behalf. This is very similar to tithing now, right? So when you give to the church, you're not giving directly to Jesus. You're giving it to people to use it on Jesus' behalf, hopefully in a very positive and impactful way that's expanding the kingdom of God. So Now, that being said, obviously they needed these gifts as well. So, Jesus is about to have to, I'm sorry, not Jesus, Joseph, and Mary, they're all going to have to go to Egypt and then, spend a bunch of time there before coming back. That's going to need expenses to be paid for that, for the traveling, for supplies, for food, lodging, all that kind of stuff. So God knew what was in front of them, and he made this happen so that he could anticipate the needs and go ahead and provide for them. So now when we take a look at the gifts themselves, there's actually some symbology in them as well. So gold speaks of royalty. The incense, or frankincense, which is a form of incense, that speaks of divinity. And then myrrh, that speaks of death, or you could also classify that as humanity almost. And that was actually something that was used as like an antiseptic oil or an embalming fluid. And I know that probably you wouldn't ever put embalming fluid on your baby register, but without realizing it, it was still something that was expensive, could be sold, and definitely, used to, like I said, provide funds for Joseph and Mary and Jesus. Now, without realizing it, though, they were just presenting expensive gifts to honor him, but they were actually kind of symbolizing the story of Christ itself, right? So the gold speaks of the royalty. So he came down from heaven as king instantly from the second he was born. Then, like I said, the incense, that's divinity, right? So he's coming, he's fulfilling his ministry and priestly duties to the world. That's the incense. And then he died for our sins, which is the myrrh. But even more importantly, way more important than any of the gifts, they fell down and worshiped him, right? So I will go ahead and end the video on this little note here. So here in chapter 2, we see the 3 clear, distinct responses that you can have to Jesus, and these are even applicable today, right? You can be like King Herod and actively hate Jesus. You could be like the priests and the scribes and the people of Jerusalem and, just be completely indifferent to him, know that he's around, but, not do anything to pursue him. Or 3, you can be like the wise men and worship him, right? And not just, they didn't just see the star and be like, oh my gosh, that's so pretty. Oh, that probably means that, the Messiah's come. That's great. But I got things to do. No, that they actively sought him out. They did not let anything stop their pursuit. They weren't dissuaded by Herod. They weren't dissuaded by, the people of Jerusalem, the priests, the scribes. They saw the sign. They saw, the importance of what was going on here, the amazing birth of the Messiah, and they did not let a thing stop them from getting to him and worshiping him. And they showed that worship in several ways, right? Like I said, the treasures, and then just laying down, kneeling down and worshiping him. And then additionally, obedience. So, God had warned them, hey, don't go back that way. You need to take this detour the long way home, to make sure that you avoid Herod and his people. And that's exactly what they did. Well, guys and gals, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was insightful for you, or at least helped you understand the text a little bit better. I look forward to doing the rest of chapter 2 here and the rest of Matthew coming soon. It's definitely a lot of work that's going into this. But yeah, I cannot wait. I'll see you next time. You have a great day.